In episode 59, Operate a Measurable Vulnerability Management Program Continually, we focus on turning vulnerability data into real, observable reductions in risk rather than just long lists of issues. Modern tools can generate thousands of findings quickly, but without structure, those lists mostly create fatigue and controversy instead of decisions. The aim here is to treat vulnerability management as a continuous, measurable practice that fits naturally into the secure software lifecycle. For someone working toward the Certified Secure Software Lifecycle Professional (CSSLP) credential, this means being able to connect code, configuration, and operational realities into one coherent risk story. When you operate this way, vulnerabilities stop being abstract numbers and become concrete items you can close with confidence. A dependable program starts with accurate inventories that describe more than just hostnames and Internet protocol addresses. You need a live view of applications, services, containers, servers, databases, and cloud resources, including where they run and who owns them. Each asset should carry attributes such as business criticality, data sensitivity, external exposure, and lifecycle stage so you can understand its importance quickly. Aligning asset value and exposure allows you to see that a medium severity flaw on an Internet-facing payment microservice may be more urgent than a high-severity issue on an isolated lab box. This context becomes the lens through which every finding is viewed and prioritized. Vulnerability discovery rarely comes from a single tool, so a continual program aggregates multiple sources responsibly. Network and host scanners read the infrastructure layer, while application security testing surfaces flaws in web endpoints, application programming interfaces, and business logic. Advisories from vendors and public databases reveal newly disclosed issues that scanners may not yet know how to detect. Bug bounty submissions and penetration test reports add creative, exploit chain perspectives that automated tools might miss. Bringing these inputs into one system means you can see the full picture of weaknesses affecting a component, instead of chasing 5 disconnected reports for the same risk. As findings arrive from different angles, deduplication becomes a critical discipline. Rather than treating every line of every report as unique, you group findings by root cause and affected component. A single, outdated framework, misconfigured header, or insecure authorization pattern might explain dozens of individual scanner entries across environments. Grouping them into clusters makes it easier to see which systemic changes will retire large portions of the backlog at once. It also reduces noise for development and operations teams, who receive focused work items describing a shared issue rather than a flood of nearly identical tickets. Clarity here is one of the strongest levers for sustained progress. Assessing exploitability is what turns a list of known weaknesses into a ranked set of risks. You consider whether public exploits or proof-of-concept code are available, how difficult exploitation would be in your architecture, and whether the vulnerability lies on an attack surface that is realistically reachable. Compensating controls matter as well. A flaw behind strong segmentation and strict authentication may be less urgent than the same flaw on an unauthenticated edge system. This does not mean you ignore internal issues, but you use exploitability and exposure to shape which items move first. Over time, this risk-informed view builds trust between security and engineering stakeholders because the order of work has a clear, shared rationale. Ownership and timelines transform vulnerability work from "somebody should fix this" into "this person will fix it by this date." Each cluster or individual finding is assigned to a clear owner, usually at the team or service level, and tracked through familiar ticketing systems.
Tickets should include concise narratives that explain the risk in business-aware language, the technical root cause, and any relevant evidence, such as request samples or screenshots. Deadlines should be calibrated to severity and exploitability expectations, with service-level targets that everyone understands before incidents occur. When owners, narratives, and dates are all visible, vulnerability management becomes a normal part of backlog planning rather than a mysterious external demand. Validation is as important as initial remediation work because unverified fixes often fail silently. After a change is deployed, you rescan the relevant assets to see whether automated tools still detect the issue. You complement those scans with targeted checks, such as replaying original exploit steps or reviewing configuration snapshots to confirm that root causes have actually been addressed. Production telemetry adds another lens, showing whether suspicious patterns, error messages, or anomalous access attempts associated with a vulnerability have disappeared. Combining these validation layers builds confidence that issues are not just moved to resolved in a system, but truly removed from the environment. Aging and backlog health metrics prevent slow-moving risks from becoming permanent fixtures. You track how long vulnerabilities of different severities have been open, which services or components accumulate the most lingering issues, and where progress has stalled. Objective thresholds, such as maximum allowed age for critical findings, define when automatic escalation occurs to higher levels of management. These mechanisms keep vulnerability items from fading into the background simply because they are not noisy today. They also provide early signs that certain teams, platforms, or processes may need extra support or redesign to handle security work effectively. Reporting then shifts from easy-to-abuse counts to more meaningful measures of risk reduced. Raw counts of vulnerabilities closed or scan coverage percentages can be useful, but they are poor proxies for actual safety. More insightful views show how many high-risk issues have been removed from critical assets, how exposure windows are shrinking for serious flaws, and how often regressions occur. You might also show how clusters tied to high-value services are shrinking over time, or how quickly new severe vulnerabilities are addressed compared to previous periods. These perspectives help leadership see that vulnerability management is changing the organization's risk posture, not just cleaning up dashboards. As patterns emerge, systemic causes should attract as much attention as individual fixes. If multiple applications suffer from the same insecure default configuration, missing input validation step, or weak library choice, the answer is to ship hardened patterns rather than repeatedly patch each instance. That may involve new secure coding guidelines, shared libraries, framework extensions, or baseline configurations baked into templates. When these patterns land in the earliest stages of the lifecycle, they prevent entire classes of vulnerabilities from recurring. This is where vulnerability management intersects most directly with secure design and implementation practices. No organization can remediate every vulnerability immediately, which is why exception governance is part of a realistic program. When a risk must be accepted temporarily, you document why, who approved the decision, which compensating controls are in place, and when the exception will expire. Monitoring is important here. You track these accepted risks as actively as open vulnerabilities and highlight them in periodic reviews. If circumstances change, such as new exploit techniques or business reliance on the affected system expanding, exceptions are revisited early. This level of discipline keeps risk acceptance from turning into quiet, indefinite risk tolerance. Cadence is the rhythm that keeps the program aligned with how your systems actually change. You adjust scan and review frequencies to match release trains, infrastructure updates, and business cycles.
Rapidly evolving services may warrant more frequent scanning, while slower-moving, tightly controlled platforms might use deeper but less frequent assessments. Coordination with change management ensures that major deployments are followed by targeted vulnerability checks and that findings can be fed back into planning quickly. When cadence matches the pace of development and operations, vulnerability management feels integrated instead of constantly lagging behind reality. A quick mental review of this episode's themes shows a continuous loop from discovery to learning. You begin with solid inventories and aggregated sources, organize findings by root cause, and weigh exploitability in context. Ownership, validation, and backlog health turn remediation into a managed workflow, while risk-based reporting and systemic improvements show that the effort is paying off. Exceptions and tuned cadence keep the program honest about what remains and how often it is revisited. Together, these habits create a vulnerability management program that is both measurable and sustainable. The practical conclusion for episode 59 is to immediately immediately on one unresolved cluster of vulnerabilities that affects a meaningful system. Instead of pushing individual tickets piecemeal, you define a root cause fix that eliminates the shared weakness, whether that is a framework upgrade, a configuration baseline change, or a new library pattern. You assign clear ownership, set a realistic deadline, and plan how validation will demonstrate that the cluster is truly closed. Taking this approach even once shows how a measured, continuous program can translate raw findings into durable risk reduction. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.